Pit Talk, brought to you by Shannon's.
Cars are our passion. Building, restoring, or modifying. It's about making it our own. It's an obsession. Shannon's know what it's worth. That's why the agreed value includes all your modifications. Get a quote online today.
This is the moment then that we've all been waiting for.
4 in a row, Max.
Here comes Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris.
They are playing hardball out there at the moment.
The pivotal moment of 2024.
Well, the world's fastest riders on two wheels are making their way down under for this weekend's Australian MotoGP at Phillip Island. And Matt, I would say this is the best weekend of the year on the MotoGP calendar.
Not that we're biased.
Not that we're biased.
World's best riders, world's best bikes, world's best racetrack, world's possibly worst weather for a racetrack, but hopefully we get one day over the course of the weekend. But yeah, the best weekend of the year by far.
Well, this episode of Pit Talk is brought to you by Shannon's Insurance. I'm your host, Renita Vermeulen, and joining me is Matt Clayton. And we're going to break down everything that you need to know ahead of this weekend's Australian Grand Prix. And the breaking news coming out is there's a few big names are not making their debut this weekend, and one of those is the world champion who was crowned in Japan, Marc Marquez. So what's going with Marquez? Why is he not at Phillip Island this year?
Well, we knew that he wasn't going to be at the island because of the shoulder injury that he had in Indonesia when Marco Bezzecchi ran up the back of him on the first lap. So, you know, it's sort of, Marc's had his Australian drama before he's got to Australia. It's usually dramatic when he gets here. He gets disqualified, he crashes from the lead, he wins. It's never a dull moment for Marc. You remember him the start last year where he slipped on one of his own tear-offs and almost was like 15th on the first lap and still came back and won the race. But we knew Marc wasn't going to be at the island because he had the shoulder injury from Indonesia. What's interesting was they tried to let this just heal itself without surgery. And, you know, part of that is you don't want to go under the knife at any time. Marc Marquez, the right side of his body, does not need any more surgeries because we've had enough of those. So he's gone under the knife in Spain over the course of last weekend. So we knew he was going to miss Australia and Malaysia. Interesting thing for me now, that only means there's 2 rounds after that, Portimao and Valencia. Valencia, really important because you've got effectively the first day of 2026, that test one day after the Grand Prix. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he misses Portimao. It's not a circuit he's been particularly great at, and there's no small crashes at Portimao. Just the nature of that track. He's won the World Championship, right?
Portimao's similar to Phillip Island, though.
Correct. Yeah, high risk, high reward, and he's won the championship. It's done. He had a chance to possibly have his greatest season ever with 13 wins if he had won 2 of the last 4. The fact that he's going to miss 2 of those 4, the stats are kind of irrelevant. The only stat he wanted to was the 7th World Championship. He got that. So I think Valencia, come back, do that race weekend, you know, salute the crowd. They'll all hold him as a hero there. But it's the test. That's the important thing now. 2025 is done. He's thinking about 26. Why put yourself at risk? So yeah, it's unfortunate that he's going to miss Australia because I would have loved to have seen him on that red Ducati around Phillip Island, a track where he's so good at any time. But it's a sensible decision. There's nothing to fight for this season. Get yourself right for Valencia, start 2026 off in November the right way, and then just put 2025 to bed, I think. But a shame for the Aussie fans, definitely.
But the other names that aren't appearing is Maverick Vinales, who's still recovering. And it makes me think, well, maybe Maverick might have needed to have this surgery. Or whatever the situation, we don't know the ins and outs. But Jorge Martin and the listeners who listen to us on Pit Talk, you predicted that if Jorge Martin was back and he was here, this could have been the race that he particularly won or at least fought with Marc for, right?
When I thought a podium would be in the offing for Martin with the comeback. Obviously, he's so underdone. He doesn't really know the bike. He's been so battered and bruised all year, but I thought if he gets on the podium before the end of 25, it'll be at Phillip Island. He's been on pole here the last 3 years. So post-COVID, when we came back, he's been the fastest rider at Phillip Island for 3 years. He hasn't had a win. He came so close in the year that Joan Zarco won. He led for 26 laps and 4 corners or whatever it was before he got swamped on the last lap. But you look at the injuries, you mentioned Vinales as well. That's our entire front row starters from last year. Martin on pole, Marquez second, Vinales third on the Aprilia last year. And Phillip Island's a track where Maverick just pulls random results out of the bag because he's won there before. You never know with Maverick, it's either one extreme or the other. Last year was good Maverick, previous year was no good Maverick, but it happens. You've got your entire front row from last year's Australian Grand Prix not here. And so the interesting part for me, we know all 3 riders are going to be replaced by guys who will be on bikes and be part of the mix, but they're not going to be competing for anything meaningful, let's be honest. We should tick those off in a sec. But how open does it make this Australian Grand Prix? I can't think of a race where you look on Sunday and think, who on earth is going to win this thing? Because there's a lot of reasons to not pick people. Someone's got to win it. And whoever that person is, super interesting, because right now there's a lot of guys that aren't making great cases for themselves out there.
Well, no, but then you also think back to the recent races, and we've had every manufacturer in the top 5 or 6 or whatever it is. So it could literally be a Honda win, which is the first time in how long? A Aprilia win, a KTM win, a Yamaha win. Imagine if Jack Miller does that.
But it just feels super open, and the nature of the way races tend to take place at this track is not really anywhere that lends itself to this type of racing, because it's very hard to get away. You know that you don't have 27 laps of tyre life around there because this place just eats tyres. So it's how you decide to run the race. You think back to the dare I say it, the race before Malaysia in 2015, and there was the 2017 race was an amazing pack race as well. It's hard to really break away there. And last year we had this fantastic duel between Jorge Martin and Marc Marquez that boiled down to the last couple of laps. This year, because you don't have guys with great island pedigree, I reckon you could throw a blanket over about 5 or 6 guys, and it might literally come down to a 2-3 lap showdown at the end. It might be more Moto3 than Moto3 is, which is, Moto3 at the island's awesome at the best of times, but we could have just a really interesting race at the island. Picking a winner from this, it's so hard. I mean, I've given it some thought, but not with any great conviction. I wouldn't put my house on. I might put yours.
Oh, okay, thanks.
That's fine. But I'm not super confident, because you could make a case for half a dozen guys to win this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's so exciting is we have these changes with the riders. We have the unpredictability of the weather at Phillip Island every year, because you don't know what it's going to bring. And then we have the replacement riders. So we have Michele Pirro, who's replacing Marc Marquez. We have Pol Espargaro replacing Maverick Vinales, and Lorenzo Savadori, who's replacing Jorge Martin. Now, before we jumped on here to record, you were like, when did Sava last race at Phillip Island?
And I forgot that it was last year, because he replaced Aprilia when Malaysia was injured, of course, and Maverick was on the grid. But
before that?
Well, it was in the 125 in about 2010 or something. And the Puro one, like you remember, before Ducati lost all their concessions, he would pop up for 1 or 2 races a year, usually be Misano or Mugello or somewhere. I thought to myself, when was the last time he raced a MotoGP bike at Phillip Island? It was 2012, when we still had the CRT, the claiming rule teams. It's that far back. So in terms of knowledge of the island, MotoGP, being in that intense level of competition, it's been a while. And he's been a guy that Ducati's been so good that he hasn't been able to make these wildcard appearances because they've lost their concessions. So talk about being thrown in the deep end. My goodness.
Oh, well, I mean, the deep end this year, I could say for Pecco Bagnaia. Let's talk about that, because coming off Japan, fantastic weekend. Unfortunately overshadowed by Marc Marquez winning the championship.
Story of his season, huh?
Well, yeah, and then you fast forward to Indonesia, where Somkhat Chantra scored points and Pecco Bagnaia didn't.
Yeah.
How's Pecco going to be this weekend? Is this a weekend where Marc's out of the question? Pecco's going to have everyone focused on him, because they're still not giving us an answer as to what is the issue, what's going on with Pecco, what's going on with the bike, how can he come forward from this? Can we see a better Pecco this weekend?
It'd hard to be worse, wouldn't it? I mean, you have a look at what happened between Japan and Indonesia. I mean, if you talked about the extremity of results between 2 races 7 days apart, you'd think we'd be talking about someone like Somkhat Chantra or a rookie or some bizarre weather conditions or something. The weather was pretty benign in both places. He looked like he was completely unbeatable in Japan, and he looked absolutely hopeless in Indonesia. And this is a guy who's a 2-time MotoGP world champion. And it does show you how much of what Pecco's doing at the moment, how much is going on between his ears rather than between the handlebars at this point, because he's convinced that he can't ride this GP 25 point, whatever it is at this point. How many bits have they taken off the 24? You had Ucho Salucci at VR46 saying, Pecco borrowed Franco Morbidelli's bike at the Misano test. Ducati factory team didn't want to allow for that. There's all this mixed messaging going on, and it's very unusual, to take people behind the curtain here. Pecco's usually very good with media. And the fact that he was too just distraught by what happened in Indonesia to even speak at Mandalika, that's really, really unlike him. And you've got this sort of push-pull, and I wrote about this for Fox Sports during the week, and we talked about it with Peter Baum actually a couple of weeks ago. Ducati's a very engineering-focused team under Gigi Dall'Igna, right? So as far as Gigi sees it, the rider is just another go-faster bit to put on the bike. And so if the telemetry and the wind tunnel and everything says that a particular bike is faster for whatever reason, then it's up to the rider to meet that. And we've talked all year about the GP25 not being as good as the 24. 25 still won the World Championship because it had Marc Marquez on it. So as far as Gigi sees it, the rider is just another tool to make the bike achieve its, what it should be achieving, and it hasn't with Pecco. Pecco's probably someone who needs... Some guys need a prod and some guys need an arm around their shoulder. And I think Pecco's a guy who needs an arm around his shoulder. I thought it was really interesting after Indonesia where Davide Tardozzi was the guy who faced the press with Pecco not doing it. And he sort of talked about the fact that, emotionally he needs our help right now. And you can just look at the raw data and try and engineer your way out of a situation. But there's a human element to this. And it's not to say that the way Pecco goes about it is wrong, because he won 2 World Championships doing it. And he narrowly lost 2 others. So it clearly works. But you've got this push-pull between engineering-focused Gigi Dall'Igna, Bagnaia, who needs the perfect feel to be good, and we've seen what happens when he has the perfect feel. He wins World Championships. So, look, this weekend to me is kind of the beginning of 2026, right? They need to get him right and comfortable and not just jumping at shadows like he has been, because this will just run into 26 if they don't, and they've got to repair this rider. You're not going to have Marc forever, and there's no telling whether you're going to have this advantage forever. Because in 2027, we get this rule reset, right? They've got to get their rider right. He's been the most successful rider in Ducati's MotoGP history. They can't just throw him out because he's not working.
I think what I'm looking forward to this weekend is the fact that Phillip Island's a circuit where they don't necessarily need to utilise as much technology that's on the bike.
Correct.
Is there even a corner where they potentially do use the ride height device?
Possibly out of 4, out of Miller Corner, that'd be about it. But it's so fast and flowing. You're right. It's an analogue circuit.
Yeah.
It's very old school in that regard. It's not a circuit that was designed, out of a computer or, built like a particular circuit designer. It's a natural racetrack. It's one of the few that's left.
Yeah.
And you wonder if it is a bit more analogue and it's more in the rider's hands than the machine's hand. Is this what he needs right now? I would say yes.
Well, the professor, like we said it so many times, that's what makes me think. But the other downside with Phillip Island is it is a circuit where you need confidence.
Yes.
Because you are going in, remember that big crash going into turn 1 years ago where they slid off? Like every corner, every aspect of this circuit, you need to be so confident in yourself, in the machine, trusting the weather because the wind can change everything at that moment. So can that hinder Pecco?
Well, you either need the confidence or you need to use one of Fabio Quartararo's sayings about Jack Miller, take your brain out. And sometimes you can actually overthink these things. It comes down to either having the confidence or being able to bluff yourself that you have the confidence. And there's a reason why certain riders have an affinity with this particular place. It's no surprise that Jorge Martin is fast here when he's here, because he's just going to rip the throttle harder than everybody else and be confident and almost to a point of arrogance that he's going to make all of these corners work. Equally, you get a guy who has more emotional peaks and troughs like Vinales that we were talking about before. When Maverick's on here in the past and when he feels at one with the bike, he's amazing to watch because it's just so precise and you can see the confidence. There's like a real body language about the way that he rides. So I think Friday's super interesting. If Pecco struggles in that first session, if he is floundering around the back of getting into Q2, Friday afternoon, I don't think he'll be able to turn around a bad Friday afternoon if it goes wrong. If he has a good Friday afternoon, he's going to be really strong for the rest of the weekend because you've got that confidence base to build on. So, yeah, super interesting.
I'm glad you brought up the body language because that's something I noticed watching Pecco last year at Phillip Island.
Yeah.
Was his body language on Friday wasn't showing that confidence, and then you could see it. So something for you guys at home to think about as well is the fact that what happens Friday can really determine the rest of your weekend because, yeah, obviously we have Saturday, we have the qualifying, we have the sprint, but if you're not getting that set up right, and looking at the weather, Friday's meant to be wet, Saturday's looking dry, and then Sunday's possible showers, and we know that can change on a whim. That can affect everything.
Yeah, massively so. There's some riders that need to be a slow burn and they need to build up. There'll be other guys who'll go out and almost set their fastest lap time for the weekend on their second flying lap on Friday. And that's what's so interesting about this track. It probably plays more into that personality and confidence that you mentioned, maybe more than some of the more sort of stop-go tracks where there's kind of only really one way to go fast.
Yeah.
Where this is a track where, the human element of it comes out a lot more. So as far as Bagnaia goes, yeah, super interesting to see how this plays out.
Now, Jack Miller, we were talking about this off-air. The last time he was on the podium, 2019, with Pramac.
The Dark Knight Rises, the special one-off livery that he had on race day. Interesting. And
but now he's back with the same
who's
team,
he
different
riding with
manufacturer.
again? I know.
But could this be his chance at the podium or the win on home soil in MotoGP?
It's interesting with Jack in that he's always qualified much better than he races at the island. I think he sort of regresses to the mean. Over one lap, he does amazing things. He's often done that. You know, back in his Honda days with Australia Galicia, I mean, he's qualifying second row on that bike. So he is able to churn one lap out of it. It's funny with home Grand Prix for any rider at any track. Some people see it as being like a burden or a weight on their shoulders. I think Jack gets massively energised by the home crowd and the flags, and I mean, he's got 120 people from his family in Queensland and New Zealand that come over. It's hard for a lot of guys in 2 and 4 wheels to cope with that home support. Jack's always thrived off that. And we know that the season started pretty well and has kind of petered out a little bit. It's not been great. He was very convincing, I thought, in Indonesia. It was really good to see him at the back of that front pack, and it looked like he was going well until he got dive bombed by Franco Morbidelli, joined the club, Jack. But this strikes me as a weekend. I can absolutely see him in Q2, and this is not somewhere Jack's been for a lot of the year. Now, whether a Yamaha can sustain that sort of pace if he's able to qualify in the first 3 rows over the course of a Grand Prix, maybe not, in a sprint possibly, but it's all about Friday for Jack. He's just got to get himself in Q2. You know that Quartararo is going to be there. Miguel Oliveira's been a lot better since he got sacked, quite frankly, from Yamaha. Maybe he's just riding a bit more freely, but he's been quite decent. Alex Rins is excellent at Phillip Island.
Yes.
And, he won there in 22 on the Suzuki. I wouldn't have thought he'd be a factor until we saw what we saw in Indonesia. And it was a bit of fool's gold there because he ran the soft tyre and it looked amazing, and then he ran out of tyre. But the island's a track where he makes a difference. He's always been good at Phillip Island. So maybe we will see some more Yamaha representation. This is not a super horsepower track, as we know. And, a bike that turns, it's not all about top speed there. So Jack's not within, it's not beyond the realms to imagine him in Q2. And then from there, maybe we can see something.
What's your thoughts on the fact of the riders knowing Mark's not there? They're not having to fight for that championship anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think it's like, well, the cat's away, the mice will play? Like, these guys are really going to battle it out?
100%. Because you look at the one big championship battle, and I use battle in inverted commas because it's not really. Alex Marquez is more likely than not to still runner-up in the World Championship this weekend. That's kind of the only thing really left of intrigue in the points table. No one's really thinking about third from there on. And the fact that Mark, as dominant as Mark's been generally, and then you come to a track where he's awesome anyway, the fact that he's not there, the fact that Martin's not there, someone like Maverick who might have a random result, this just feels so open. So I think the way a lot of these other riders will approach the weekend is really interesting. Pressure's off, right? Yeah. It's like an absolute one-off wildcard. Let's just go for this. And I think because of that, we're going to see a different race emotionally for a lot of these guys. And I think we might see a few surprises this weekend. You're thinking, God, this guy's on the third and second row of the grid. How did that happen? This guy's on a sprint podium. We know this track suits certain riders and not others. So I think it'd be pretty mixed up.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the tricky question. I know you've been waiting for it. I believe you have an article coming out on foxsports.com.au/motorsport, Matt. What's your thoughts this weekend? Who's for pole? Oof. Who's for the Grand Prix podium?
It wouldn't surprise me in qualifying at all if we see one of those Fabio Quartararo specials. Now, this is not something that I have written in the story that will probably be up by the time anyone listens to this. Quartararo this year watching him in qualifying has been sort of one of my absolute favourite things of this season, because 4 times this year he's put a bike on pole. It's got absolutely no business being there. Now, it regresses to the mean in the race. But they're almost the most fun, 90-second periods of MotoGP, because you look at the timing screen, it's like, how is he doing that?
Yeah.
And so there's every chance that he could pull one of those out. You wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, because he's the best one-lap rider in MotoGP, and that's, other than maybe Jorge Martin, who's not here, a fully fit Jorge Martin. That wouldn't surprise me. But in terms of the race win, to me, there's kind of 5 guys that are in the frame here, and it's hard to separate them. So I sort of went through a bit of a process of elimination. The one I like is Marco Bezzecchi, but with asterisks here.
Yes.
One, we know he's got a grid penalty for what he did to Marc Marquez in Indonesia. Now, as we speak right now, we don't know what that grid penalty is. It'll be either 3 places or 5. Grid penalties at Phillip Island aren't massively relevant. The only concern I've got a bit with Aprilia is that this is the time of year where they tend to go downhill a little bit. They come to the flyaways and they kind of disappear. It's happened time and time again. You know when Aprilia's never finished better than 8th at Phillip Island before? It's never happened.
But they have led a lap here.
Correct.
The first time they ever led in a Grand Prix, right?
Yeah. And so, they've tended to be a bike in the past, the Aprilia, where it has like one or two awesome circuits a year. Like it was always like Termas, Barcelona with LH because he lived down the road, of course. But then they'd come to the flyways and they'd kind of disappear. It was too hot. You remember when they went to India the other year, like LH is burning himself on the bike. And it's never really operated great in the flyways. But it seems like a more rounded bike and a more rounded team this year. So I'm wondering if that holds for here. Bezzecchi's not 100% fit. He's had two massive accidents the last two races. He got taken out by his own teammate in Japan, of course. How fit is he? And what does the grid penalty play in? So without going through look, I like Fabio Di Giannantonio is really good at Phillip Island. Now we know the 25's not been so great, but Digi's last 2 years here, podium in 23 in the Crazy Zarco race. He came from 12th to finish 4th last year. He just about got on the podium from the 4th row last year. He's enormously rapid at the end of races. So he's one of those guys, he'll have great tyre life at the end. So if he's in the top 4 or 5 in 7 laps to go, look out because he's really, really good here. Fermin Aldeguer's got an awesome Moto2 CV here. I think he's had 3 top 4 finishes in a row. 1 here last year in Moto2. Talk about a guy that's confident. He's just demolished everybody in Indonesia. So he's another guy that's in the frame for me. But my favourite for the race win, Renita, is Pecco Bagnaia.
Really?
Yes.
But then we're just talking before and we're talking about, is he right? Is he mentally capable?
Massive asterisk of all time here. Let's look at the background with Pecco. His very, very first MotoGP result of any note was 2019. He finished 4th. Really tough rookie season. He was right on the back of Jack Miller, who was his teammate when Jack took that podium in 19. Since we've been back here post-COVID in 22, 23, 24, he's been on the podium every year. He hasn't qualified lower than 5th. This is a good Pecco track. Mark's not there. Martin's not there. Now, it would require a massive swing between one race to the other based on what we saw in Indonesia. We only need to go back 2 races to know what good Pecco looks like. Because in Japan, he looked utterly untouchable. Yes, I know Mark was sort of playing for the championship at that point. No one saw him after the start for 2 straight days. He was on pole, he led every lap of the sprint, he led every lap of the Grand Prix. He made everyone look ridiculous. If you can fluctuate between that extreme to the other extreme in Indonesia, why can't we see Japan Pecco this weekend as opposed to Indonesia Pecco? It's in the cards, it's a good track for him. He's usually pretty confident here. He gets a decent starter on Friday. I think he's going to be a very, very hard man to beat come Sunday. Now, it may sound like the craziest prediction of all time, given the guy was last and absolutely hopeless 2 weeks ago. But this is Pecco Bagnaia in 2025. This is what happens. Why can't we have an extreme swing back the other way?
I mean, this year we've had a Honda on the podium. We've seen our world champion crash out. There's so many things on our bingo card, and I swear I say this every episode. I was not expecting that in 2025.
Not
so,
at all.
I mean, yeah, Pecco comeback. Why not?
And then he could also go to Malaysia the following weekend and be last.
Well, because we know Alex Marquez is good at Malaysia. So, yeah
and
exactly.
Pecco, there's no middle ground with Pecco this year. It's either really, really good or more often than not, really, really bad.
Yeah.
Given what you mentioned before, how you laid it out with the people that aren't here and the fact it's such a particular track. Now, if, small word, big consequences, like I always say, if you can have that confidence here, he's proven it before. He's been very, very fast here for a long period of time. Given the guys that aren't here, why not?
It's funny because Matt was like, you're going to be shocked at my prediction. And
Have I talked you around?
A little bit. Now I'm understanding it. But before I was thinking, you were joking, like, what if it's Piro or what if it's a Polar Bugger or, Jack Miller? Now that you said it, I'm going, yeah, actually, I can see it. In my mind, though, I'm still thinking, yeah, it's Bez, maybe a Zarco because of, like, how he's been here in the past. I remember last year when we spoke to Chris said, don't rule out Zarco back then on the Honda. So, yeah, I can see it, but I just think the weather's going to come into play so much.
But this is why this weekend is so compelling, because we're trying to find perfect answers to questions where every single answer is imperfect. There's always a, oh, but what about this? Oh, but what about this? You mentioned Zarco. First half of the season, fantastic. Second half of the season, he's fallen off a cliff. He scored about 30 points in the last 9 rounds. He's been nowhere. Do the factory Hondas come to play? I don't know. I mean, Luca Marini's never had a great result here. That bike looks great at the moment.
But Joan Mir has had good results.
And he's been good here too. Now, can he stay on? Is he a podium chance? You could make a case for 12 to 14 riders to potentially be on a podium this weekend. We've only got 20 of them, whatever it is, because there's so many guys out injured at the moment. That's what makes this so compelling.
I think, yeah, even just when you said that, I'm going, Pedro Acosta last year, he crashed out, but he was fighting hard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, potential. Oh, no, he crashed out in the sprint. That's right, and then injured himself.
Grand Prix, correct.
I think what I'm excited for off track, I mean, we spoke about on track, off track is Pedro Acosta's last year had the mullet helmet. We know we've got the Aussies. We love the fact that they really get into the Australian isms of this weekend.
Pedro's half Australian, hangs out with Remy Gardner so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Half Australian.
Exactly.
We'll adopt him.
But the cool thing is we have Aussies across all three classes. So Jack Miller, we know in MotoGP. This weekend in Moto2, we have two Aussies, Senna Agius, and Harrison Voigt is making his wild card once again, this time with the MT Helmets MSI team in Moto2. Now, Senna, he's had his win this season. Last year at Phillip Island was his first ever Moto2 podium.
Yep.
How do we think he's going to go? Because he is one of those ones who I feel like relishes in the fact that it's the home race for him. He has all that extra press and extra responsibilities, but it seems to work for him.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, he was literally the busiest man in Phillip Island last year. If there was, can you come and do this? Yep, I'll be there. And he would, I mean, I thought you're going to be exhausted by the time you get on the bike, but he just revelled in the support. And you have to look at these guys like they do all these other rounds where they are so far from home. They are literally the furthest from home that you could possibly be. He's got a lot of family that will come down. I love the way he handled all of that last year. And so to have what at the time was a career best result, the place went nuts. It was fantastic to be there. And you look at where he's at 12 months on, he's become a guy who we're expecting to see at the front and we're disappointed now when he's not, where in the past it's like, oh, Senna's up the front, what a bonus. He's won a Grand Prix. He comes back here knowing what the madness is going to be like. He's had a couple of not so great rounds, like Motegi was pretty ordinary. Like he's had a couple of rounds that haven't gone quite so well. But if there's a chance for someone to have a one-off result, you could absolutely see it because I think he relishes the pressure. He loves it. He loves the support and the adulation. And yeah, look, the more Aussies we can have on World Championship grids, you mentioned Harrison Voigt, he was here last year, of course, as well. So, and Moto2 is, you know, it's the most live of all the championships, of course. It's still going. That'll be a tense one Sunday. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see Senna right up the sharp end.
And then if we look at Moto3, we've got our Jacob Rulstone and Joel Kelso. Now, I actually saw Joel last weekend at the Bathurst 1000.
Not something you thought you were going to say.
Not something I thought I was going to say at all. His first ever Bathurst 1000. And I was talking to him. I said, how are you feeling? And same for him. He's like, I love coming home. I love being here in this environment, having my friends and my family there. And I said, okay, well, what's the goal for this weekend? He's like, I think I can get on the podium.
Well, we know in qualifying there's no issues with Joel because he's always up on the first one or two rows. It's always that, what's his pace like in the last 4 or 5 laps of a race? But again, podium finisher in his home Grand Prix. Hopefully not those conditions. My God, we needed boats rather than Moto3 bikes that year. That was revolting. So we don't want any part of that. But we know he's risen to the occasion here in the past. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's on the front row. He's just almost permanently on the front row these days. Aussie pole would be quite nice.
Oh, yeah.
And then Jacob Ralston, look, we know it's been a tough year for him. What's the old saying? If you're only as good as your last race, then he's pretty bloody good because he finished 5th in his last race at Indonesia. It's, you know, career best for him. So it's been a difficult year for him. Injured at the beginning, it's been tough. You know, he doesn't have his ride next year with that team. Come here with, you know, he's obviously lived the Australian Grand Prix experience once already. It's been tricky for him this year, but to come here with a great result and then sort of, you know, nestle into the support that you're going to get here. Hopefully a good result for him this weekend. And the best part about this is we've got Aussies in all 3 categories who we're expecting to be prominent. And I mean, let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of Aussie flags trackside of Phillip Island this weekend. That's what we're looking forward to.
I think for listeners though, we always go, if you only watch MotoGP and one other race, obviously we want you to support all 3 categories.
Sure.
Moto3 here.
Oh my God.
Is going to be elbows out. They're going to be going for it. And like even last weekend in Indonesia, it was the same thing. Is every lap you're on the edge of your seat going, what are they going to do? The moves that they're making and whatnot. Phillip Island's going to be another classic.
I always say it's like the last lap for 21 laps.
Yeah.
It literally feels like that. And you'll have these packs at the front of races where every points paying position is within 1.2 seconds and you could throw a tarpaulin over the front group. You know, Jack Miller won a pretty memorable Moto3 race here back in the day where, you know, 5 of them could have won that race coming into the last corner. So it's usually the best race of the day and God only knows how big the front pack, it's basically the entire field is the front pack.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you get to the last 3 laps, like there's no analysis needed, just laugh like the rest of us.
I know we sound biased, and I'm going to say this once again. If there's only one Grand Prix you watch in the whole entire year, cannot make it the Australian Grand Prix because it is one of the best, not just because we have Aussies on the grid, but the circuit provides some of the best racing that we're going to see across all three classes. And I can't wait, Matt. I'm excited. We're both going to be on the ground this weekend, so you're going to be covering it for Fox Sports. I'm also there as well, which you guys can follow along on the Fox Sports socials at Fox Motorsport and Fox Sports Oz and KO Sports everywhere as well. But Matt, I think that gives everyone a little bit of an insight into this weekend. Obviously, the weather's going to be a big player in how all the results turn out, but I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. You do the usual Phillip Island packing list that you just tip your entire wardrobe into the back of the car because you're probably going to need a ski parka and some sunscreen probably within an hour of each other when you're down there, but that's why we love this place.
That is exactly why we love it. So thank you so much again once to Shannon's Insurance for being our sponsor for this episode of Pit Talk. Matt Clayton's articles are on foxsports.com.au/motorsport. Like I said, follow along with us on socials all we can, and we're going to take you guys behind the scenes at Fox Motorsport, Fox Sports Oz and KO Sports. But from Matt Clayton and myself, Renita Vermeulen, we're going to be back real soon with more MotoGP Pit Talk.